Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. I mentioned in a previous post that in just the smallest way possible, I've dipped my toes into Courtney Ferreter's plan to pair the reading of a Faulkner novel of your choice with light, amusing reads as we celebrate this last month of summer. Courtney named her reading challenge after a play on words, using one of Faulkner's own titles, Light in August. Most of the books I'm planning to read this month are kind of heavy, to be honest, so I'll be failing her challenge, but I'd like to share one light read with you, a book that has just recently been published. Twitter is a weird place. I've had an account for a long time. First when I had a little knitting blog where I would show off what I had just made or was in the process of making. But quickly, most of the people I subscribed to were readers, people with book blogs, literature scholars, a few publishing houses and bookstores, and occasionally famous authors. One of my favorite famous authors that I follow is Geoffrey Chaucer. He's a very contemporary embodiment of the great English poet and author of the Canterbury Tales. On Twitter, he is kind, very funny, yet also very earnest, and totally hip and up-to-date. And he spells just as he did during the Middle Ages. For example, his profile gives his pronouns he, him, his. Let me give you a sample of what he writes. Here's one of his tweet reviews of a contemporary science fiction book. If you have not read this glorious, complicated, intoxicating, incandescent book, please read it. It is a novella and is very short. Fill a couple of evenings with wonder. In a space that is now perhaps best known for inciting division and alienation, and containing a fair bit of conspiracy theory and, at the very least, hyperbole, it's really lovely to find these corners of knitters and bookish people and the voices of people who want to spread thoughtfulness and openness. Yes, I follow the news on Twitter, watch live video of protests, read healthcare providers talk about what they're seeing in the ICUs in which they work, and follow a bunch of politicians to see which direction our government might be going in. But I make a point to sprinkle my timeline with far less horrifying tweets as much as I can. Professors getting online courses ready to teach and sharing their questions and advice. And Shakespeare scholars all over the world lamenting that the pandemic might prevent them from the joy of seeing each other in person at a conference. Musicians and theater people sharing both their fears about how in-person public performance will continue, but also the beauty of what they produce. The terrible puns and ridiculous jokes of comedians, etc. Fictional tweeters definitely have a place there, and Chaucer's not the only one on the platform. Enter Duchess Goldblatt, an octogenarian with a starched ruff and a sly twinkle in her eye. Duchess Goldblatt, a fictional persona whose name turns out to be a porn star name, that is, the name of a childhood pet mixed with a mother's maiden name, has definitely made the big time. For her social media avatar, Her Grace uses a 1633 Dutch portrait of an elderly woman with an expression as inscrutable as the Mona Lisa. Her wisdom, made of, quote, spun sugar and justice, is dispensed to thousands of Twitter followers who love her combination of radical acceptance, unconditional love, and sometimes sharp humor. Hopes and dreams need air, she tweets. Cracking a window in the car an inch and leaving them behind while you run errands will not work. They could die. In response to her tweets, her followers offer Duchess Goldblatt not only love, but sometimes an almost sycophantic worship in return, from appreciative tweets and private messages on Twitter to gifts, anything from pies named after her by a bakery across the country to a coffee mug with an image of her 17th century face emblazoned on front. The gifts have to be sent to her man on the outside. Whatever acquaintances will collect her mail and forward it to her, to allow the Duchess to protect her privacy and her anonymity. One of the highlights, it seems, of Duchess Goldblatt's experience online has been her connections with authors and artists. Soon after she started her Twitter account, Duchess Goldblatt struck up a friendship with musician Lyle Lovett, a relationship which jumps from exclusively digital to quite real when Lovett invites Goldblatt's creator to meet him and then attend one of his concerts. Over time, their friendship blossoms. He encourages her to write a book. The creator of the character does just that, publishing Becoming Duchess Goldblatt, a memoir credited only to Anonymous. Not surprisingly, the fictional Duchess Goldblatt already has writing experience, having supposedly published 3 books, including a family memoir, An Axe to Grind, as well as, of course, her contributions on Twitter. But this new real-life memoir is not just her story. It's also the memoir of the character's creator. Many readers and followers have assumed Duchess Goldblatt was created by either an elderly woman or a younger gay man, but this memoir's author claims to be a young woman. Perhaps we should take this claim with a grain of salt, given the author's ability to create such fleshed-out fictional personae, but the tone of Becoming Duchess Goldblatt feels quite honest. Anonymous begins her story in the midst of a difficult time in the author's life. She's in the middle of a messy divorce and is trying to figure out how to share custody of a young son with her former husband. Although she doesn't give much explanation, the author states that when her husband left her, many of her friends abandoned her as well. There are times in the book when her portrayal of the situation borders on maybe self-indulgent, but then she tells us more about her family of origin. A gentle father who died too young, her addicted brother with suicidal mental illness, her own selective mutism during her childhood years. Rather than merely overwrought self-pity, I started understanding that the author is suffering through trauma and intense despair. In an effort to overcome this sense of isolation, the author creates this social media persona, Duchess Goldblatt, so she can interact with others without risking any real connection with real-life human beings. Soon, she finds herself channeling what she thinks of as her father's voice, expressing his faith in humanity. My father's memory is a blessing and a balm, the author writes. When Duchess is at her best, he's alive again. Her character's compassionate tweets soon attract numerous followers who, as she writes, gather in her name at restaurants and bookstores and museums, at least in the old pre-pandemic world, hoping to turn their online connections with each other into true friendship. Yes, that really is just about all there is to the basic plotline of Becoming Duchess Goldblatt. It's definitely a light and comforting read, perfectly pitched for these chaotic times. Although Duchess Goldblatt uses her quirky loving-kindness to bring people together, the memoir's author feels that the character's greatest gift is one she gave herself. Over time, Duchess Goldblatt has helped the author find her own voice, not just the spirit of her father. She speaks with a voice full of both wit and generosity. Although there are moments when the final claim sounds a bit maudlin, the book nevertheless reminds us that reaching out with open hearts, perhaps with the, quote, evergreen love of all humanity that Duchess Goldblatt expresses, brings deep meaning to our own lives as well as the lives of others. Thanks for joining me today here on Hannah's Books. See you soon.